allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. And while we are silent, if we would keep in mind the family of Jim Daly, a longtime teacher and basketball coach, women's basketball coach at Whitman Hanson. He died yesterday morning. There'll be a wake at Sullivan's Funeral Home in Hanson on Thursday from 4 to 7, and a mass the next day, I believe, at 11 o'clock at the Apostle Church in Hanson. Both of my kids were lucky enough to have Jim in school when they were at Whitman Hanson years ago. He was a great teacher and a great guy, and
I had him as well. He's a great teacher.
This meeting's being recorded and televised by the local cable company. I'd like a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Next item on the agenda is the public forum. If there's anything that anyone would like to bring up here that's not on the agenda, that will be the time to introduce it. As we explained last week, if the board is going to discuss the matter or take any action, it would happen at a subsequent meeting, because the public has the right to know what we're going to be discussing and what we're going to be voting on in each meeting. No one. Approval of meeting minutes, open session September 28th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the first item on the agenda is Jim Fitzgerald from Environmental Partners to do a presentation on shared streets.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jim Fitzgerald. I'm the Director of Transportation with Environmental
Dennis,
Partners.
do you want to join this discussion?
Yes, I was just going to introduce Mr. Fitzgerald and
Okay.
Mr. Hung. This is James Fitzgerald from Environmental Partners, and Benny Hung. Jim's the Director of Transportation, and Benny's the Senior Project Manager. Jim and his firm has worked with us on the Complete Streets project, which we just finished over here in front of the police station. He's also worked with us for coming up with many other projects that were involved with the Complete Streets project. So this project here that Jim's going to be explaining is an offshoot of some of the projects we had planned through Complete Streets. And when shared streets came up, we were able to move this over and try for a grant with it, which we received. So,
Okay, great. Great. Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you very much. So, as Bruce mentioned, the project that we're here to talk about really was a spin-off of our previous efforts in identifying needs in the community. We worked with the town on Complete Streets funding, getting funds for studying the town, as well as funding for construction and implementation of a project. The project we're here to talk about tonight is Washington Street, Temple Street, and South Avenue. And for this project, we actually worked with Bruce and DPW on a different grant, Shared Streets and Spaces grant, which is really focused on assisting municipalities in meeting their individual needs for more and safer outdoor recreation, commerce, community activities, and mobility. And so in identifying potential locations for this grant, we looked at things that had some sort of commerce element to it, and where they were located in proximity to schools, what kind of benefits they could provide for outdoor recreation, etc. And again, that's how we identified this location and worked with the town in getting funds for that grant. We applied for the grant back in May, received word in July that the town was awarded $184,000 plus or minus for implementing these sorts of improvements at the intersection of Washington and Temple and South. And so first, we're just going to run through some of the existing conditions of the location. First off, the intersection actually has a bit of a crash history to it, a higher rate of crashes than our average in the state or in the district. And it's also been identified in different Mass DOT crash tools for crashes along the northern and southern legs of Washington Street to this intersection. The one thing that's very apparent when looking at the location, aside from how it's located kind of in the heart of the town, is the excessive amount of pavement here, which really lends itself to very, very long crosswalks. So just to orient you on the plan here, so north is up. So on the top left corner of the slide is the bank, the Northeastern Savings Bank, and Duval's is over on the top right corner. In any event, the northern Washington Street leg results in a crossing distance of about 66 feet, which is pretty tremendous. That's a long time for a pedestrian crossing the street to be in the road exposed to moving vehicles. And this is really related to the fact that there's on-street parking along the roadway, and yet the corners are pushed way back, really resulting in these tremendously long crosswalks. Because of where the corners are currently located, it really impacts the visibility for a pedestrian to see an oncoming motorist. And so it's a little intimidating for a pedestrian to cross the street, standing back behind parked vehicles and kind of edging into the roadway depending on the size of vehicle that's parked along the roadway. So certainly less than ideal. And the location is pretty barren. There really isn't much in the way of greenscape. It's as you can tell from the aerial photograph here, it's all hardscape and not much room for gathering for pedestrians. Because of the corners being pushed off from the edge of road, sometimes it could be difficult to see on the stop signs. The stop signs are pushed, on the sidewalk, which are quite a distance for where the motorists are traveling. As we look at a street view of Washington Street, this is looking north. Duval's is on your right, the bank is on your left. Again, this is that 66-foot long crossing distance, which is, again, very intimidating for pedestrians. And you can see how closely on the left side of the slide that parked vehicle comes to the existing crosswalk and what a pedestrian would have to do if they were crossing from left to right. Here's a different view, Washington Street looking south. The condos are on your left. And again, 58 feet of crossing with those angled parking spaces on the left. Really, with a pedestrian, again, going from left to right, the pedestrian really would have to walk a decent distance before they can even get to the stream of traffic. So if we do a before and after, here's the existing conditions, and next are what we're proposing they become. By using up some of the extra space in the roadway while also maintaining access for trucks and buses, we're really able to dramatically change the setting quite a bit here. So on each of the corners would be varying degrees of bump outs. Certainly we have more space on some corners than others, but on all four corners there would be some level of improvement. These bump outs would put the pedestrian at a safer spot before they enter into the roadway, entering onto the crosswalk. Crosswalks are dramatically shortened. That northern crosswalk that used to be 66 feet long could now be 43 feet long. And these bump outs would also allow for better placement for stop signs, for better visibility, or further enforcing vehicles to stop. The corners would be constructed with cement concrete sidewalks and wheelchair ramps that are ADA compliant. With the additional space, that we would be able to provide ADA compliant accommodations. The accent strip that is currently surrounding this intersection would be used as a treatment along the edge of the curbing. It would also allow us opportunities for street trees, although it's only labeled on one corner. We're looking at the feasibility of actually having them on 4 corners with tree pits. These would be street trees, things that would not pull up the sidewalk panels in the future. That's certainly a very important thing to make sure that the proper tree selection is made. But it really softens the aesthetics of the location quite a bit. And with this additional space, and certainly with the street trees, we then have the opportunities for benches, bicycle racks, trash receptacles, to just kind of make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly, more useful for pedestrians. This being a location surrounded by restaurants, shops, banks, condos, etc. We're trying to make this a very pedestrian friendly location while also having adequate space for the vehicles, making it a little less vehicle focused and a little bit more balanced. The project would also include a mill and overlay of the roadway. The grant that the town received would cover most of these costs, and I understand through speaking with Bruce and DPW that a supplemental budget would be provided for installing the trees themselves and for the mill and overlay of the roadway. One thing that we're still working out right now, the project is currently through the preliminary design, and now as we enter into final design, we'll really be nailing down more detail as far as exact costs and what the cost for the street furniture might be. And so we're continuing to work with DPW on that. And that is the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? That's exciting project. Yes.
A couple of questions. First, I love street trees, so great addition. Assuming based on the drawing, but just want to confirm, no loss of parking as part of the design?
So we actually have a balance in parking. There is no loss in parking. We have to shift one parking space from one corner to the other corner, just to provide appropriate spacing between crosswalks and parked vehicles, which actually do not exist today.
All right.
Yeah.
And then still, I think you mentioned it, but trucks can still make that turn even with the bump outs?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Yes, I have a couple questions. You said that in the open space where you're green, there's a possibility of putting benches or something there. Do you think that may be a hazard if people are sitting on the bench and there are a car? I mean, there's been cars that have gone through the stop sign or that blinking red light.
Yes, I've heard.
Would that facilitate a hazard that we're allowing people to sit there?
So the benches would be obviously on the bump outs on the sidewalk, so they would still be away from the path of motorists. It would just we would probably not have the benches way out on the edge, but preferably under or adjacent to that tree. The trees would be ideal. And there's really one corner on the southeast corner in front of the condos seems to be the largest bump out, where it would be the best opportunity for a bench. I don't necessarily think that we're going to have all of those treatments on each corner. In fact, I know that we won't be able to fit all of that on each corner. We wouldn't want to do that. That's a bit much. But would strategically place.
And you've measured so that trucks can turn right or left on every end of the intersection?
Correct. So what we do is we have vehicle templates that we use that are generated through software to recreate different size trucks. And so what we would like to do with DPW, which we've typically done before, is to mark out where the proposed edge of road would be before any construction took place, just to make sure that those corners are in fact acceptable to the town and for the local fire truck, for make sure it's going to work before construction.
That's it.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. But before we get too much further, I have to correct a mistake I made. I called Bruce Dennis. I spent all of Saturday morning with Dennis at a strategic planning thing, and his name was on my mind. Bruce, I apologize. I'm sorry. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Town Clerk Don Varley, who is going to give us a presentation on the need to revise our census map.
So did you guys all get your packets?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, this is the final phase of the federal census. Has to be in by the 30th of October. It's not something that I've waited for last minute. I've been working on this for quite a bit of time now, and they've actually bumped the timeline up because of COVID. This is actually the third draft of the map. I've spoken with Lincoln and Bob Curran through the whole process. I've showed them different scenarios. We had maybe thought about going to a 5th precinct, things like that. We did not need to, so this is the map that you have is what we're going to go with, what we've decided on going with. It's very minimal in change. I don't have an electronic map from 2010 because we didn't have electronic maps in 2010. So there's nothing like I could get emailed to you. But basically what's happening is it's the corner if you went down. The only change is going to be if you go down Broad Street, it'll be the even side, and it only involves 2 houses, 22 and 30. All of Central Street, because the even already exists. This is all moving from Precinct 1 to Precinct 3. This is the only change. It's actually that little corner. So it goes from Broad down to Central Street, back over to South Ave, and back up. So just that one little corner, Washington Street. It's that small little square. So that's what's changing. And this is something we're actually very lucky we didn't have to redistrict. There's a lot of communities that had to redistrict, and so we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to do a lot of things, involve having different state reps and things like that. So I'm just asking for your acceptance of the map that you have in front of you. You also should have gotten the demographics, which I find very interesting. You can go onto the Federal Census website and you can compare the 2010 numbers to the 2020 numbers as far as, what the population consisted of back then and what it consists of today. And then you see a written description of the streets. That's something that we also have to do in my office, is provide a written description. That's the last 2 pages. It wasn't done by us alone. Obviously, they have the state has, it's called the Local Elections District Review Commission, and it involves the Attorney General, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and the Governor's office, as well as each town clerk's office. So that's who kind of does all this. So I asked, do you have I have the vote right here if you want it.
We have it, but
Okay.
that's great. Thanks.
So that's basically saying that you accept this map and all the correspondence that goes with it. Like I said, I haven't done it alone. I've had Lincoln's help, and I've had Bob Curran's help. I'm not a map person, so.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to accept the town clerk's presentation?
I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions, any discussion?
Yes, I just like to say, I like the idea that you maintain the 4 precincts.
Yep.
Very little change.
Yep.
In the structure, and I think it's done. I think you did an excellent job on this.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, do you have a question?
No, Dan took the words right out of my mouth.
You just want to sign it?
I just, yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice
Thank
work,
you.
Dawn.
Yes.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah. And I'll get that tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you very much, Don. You too.
I signed these already too.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to take action to rescind the Class 2 auto dealer's license for DC Towing Auto Sales and Repair Incorporated, located at 288 Essex Street. It's no longer selling used cars. License has been surrendered to the Board of Selectmen's office. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote.
If I may briefly, as the agenda says, the old license has been surrendered.
Right.
Another, one of the old co-owners in whose name the license was not, the license was in the name of someone who's left that, actually just came into the office today to apply for a new license for that location. So just FYI to the board, has provided his paperwork is in order and all of his work is in order. That will be coming before the board at some point soon.
Thank you, Lincoln. All those in favor?
Aye.
American Recovery Plan designation vote. Lincoln.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So some of the American Rescue Plan details and amounts are coming into a little bit sharper focus. To briefly recap, the town is expecting to receive $1.59 million in total directly to the town, of which the town has already received half of those funds. In addition, there are monies that Plymouth County has accepted and is intending to send the bulk of those monies out to the various communities, municipalities, cities, and towns in Plymouth County. That work on the part of the county's part to determine how they're going to run this program is coming into a little bit greater focus. The county just very recently decided to release. They also received 50% of the total funds expected, which are expected to be approximately $101 million. They have received half of those funds directly, and they have now released for availability to be spent by municipalities half of that half, so 25% of the total expectation of federal monies to Plymouth County, of which Whitman's share at the moment is $716,715. As part of that work on the part of the county is similarly to the CARES Act, the prior federal stimulus monies in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Similarly to that, the county has set up an online portal through which the town can submit applications for the use of these monies, and the county is requesting that each Board of Selectmen take a relatively simple vote to appoint a representative on the behalf of the town. This representative would make applications, and then a reporter who could actually go in and do entries. So similarly to the CARES Act, I would suggest that the authorized representative be myself as the town administrator, and that the recorder be the town accountant, Ken Lytle. We just got the votes today, but they're relatively brief, and I can briefly read them if that suits the board for your approval. But obviously, also happy to take any questions. So it would be voted that the town administrator, Lincoln Heineman, is authorized to approve, finalize, and submit on behalf of the town any such ARPA grant application, and to make all representations and certifications required to be made on behalf of the town to complete each such application with such approval, representations, and certifications to be evidenced by the signature of the town administrator on such application. And if any such ARPA grant is awarded, the town administrator shall be the recipient of such grant on behalf of the town. And then the vote for the reporter would be that the town accountant, Ken Lytle, is authorized to prepare and enter information into the Plymouth County American Rescue Plan portal in support of one or more applications to Plymouth County for grants, ARPA grants, to be funded from a grant received by Plymouth County under the American Rescue Plan Act.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any questions, discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
You're official.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to set the November meeting schedule. Going to suggest the 9th and the 23rd.
Say again?
The 9th and the 23rd. Does that make sense?
We do have a classification hearing on the 16th.
On the 16th, never mind.
If I could just interject
Yeah.
briefly, that classification can be either the 16th or the 23rd is fine. I just wanted to make sure the board had the option since the 23rd is Thanksgiving week, you know, so, but you could do it either day. That's fine with the board of assessors and the principal assessor.
Yeah, my problem was I'm going to be out of state on the 16th, but that's
Well, how about the 9th and the 23rd?
That works for me.
9th and the 23rd then? And we'll just move the classification study to the 23rd.
That can be the 23rd, yes.
Okay. That gives us 2 days to prepare our turkeys.
Exactly, that's right.
Okay, old business. Bruce Dennis Martin. Why don't you come up, Bruce? We're gonna talk about town park security cameras. Lincoln, do you want to introduce?
Certainly, yes. So, Bruce, if the board recalls, this had been on the agenda the last 2 meetings, I believe, in response to some of the complaints that have been happening with vandalism and some fights in the town park. We met internally, just staff members, to determine not if we would have cameras, but how it would work if we did, to come up with the number, et cetera. Separately, the Public Works Commissioners had taken a vote to recommend the placement of cameras. If the board recalls, at the last meeting, you had requested someone from DPW, which Bruce nicely agreed to be that person, to come and explain that desire a little bit more clearly and answer any questions that the board may have further to it.
Okay, and we also wanted to have some information from the police, I think.
Yes.
Just to give us a clear picture of what's going on.
Correct. Chief Hanlon, I think, was not able to be here tonight, but Joe, Deputy Chief Bombardier, may have the information, that's needed. If I don't want to put him on the spot, but I think he'll be prepared to answer some
I think
questions.
I saw him nod his head.
Great. I didn't see that.
Why don't you come to the table, Joe?
Good evening. I don't have the numbers of the call volume at the park, but I know over the past few years it's been significant. And the types of calls we've had there, we've had some arson, some fires being lit in the bandstand, trash receptacles, we've had people jumping the fence at the pool, which creates a significant liability to the town right there. Those types of things. A lot of it's kids being kids, not an issue. We deal with it all the time. I'd like to assure everybody that we would not be monitoring the cameras actively. It's more of if it's there if we needed it. You'd be foolish to not think you're on camera almost probably 70% of your day anywhere you go nowadays. Cumberland Farms, 7-Eleven, the bank, everywhere you go, you're being monitored. It's more of I think a precaution and to protect property and the public. More for protection than anything. So that's where we stand on that.
And I think, as Deputy Chief Bombardier alluded to, it would, if we were to have these cameras in the park, it would really be more useful as a crime-solving tool rather than a crime prevention tool, because they wouldn't be monitored constantly, but instead we could, the police would have the opportunity to go back and look at tape if there was something that they were investigating.
Correct.
So,
Bruce?
So, to reiterate what Joe was hitting on, those are our concerns. We deal with it almost weekly, and a lot of times nobody even hears about what we're doing each morning when we drive through the park. I scribbled down some instances we had. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was earlier this year when there was an attempted campfire literally on the bandstand. And the bandstand is luckily constructed of a concrete floor with steel railings. So there's nothing that really could catch. They were lighting papers, et cetera, on fire. But, when that came up, that's when we were like, this is really getting old. It's continuous. It's always one thing or another. We've had to remove different apparatus from the playground over the years. I know if anybody recalls, we used to have small, like a policeman's car and a fire chief's car that the smaller kids could play on. They were broken repeatedly by older kids. They're $900 a piece. I replaced them a couple times, and then after that, it was like we just removed them. Right now, there's a swing set that's broken, and it's from overloading. It's the older kids. It's not the crime of the century, but if we had this on camera, we could identify the parties involved, and maybe get some restitution, or at least get it known out there that you can't be doing these things when we're not around. We still see you. We actually had an instance this year where we had over the summer where we had a porta potty in the park for baseball games, etc. It was knocked over 5 nights in a row. After 2 nights, we bolted it to the bathroom at the swimming pool, and they literally undid the bolt and the chain. We had a chain to the roof and tipped it over. It's nuisance things, but it's also things that cost a lot of money. Again, the cars, the swing set is $3,000 to replace. Things like graffiti is relentless. We painted the bandstand this year 4 times.
Basketball court.
We use a special paint on the basketball court. It costs about $1,500 to buy the 5-gallon buckets every time we repaint the basketball court, make it look really nice, and then the next thing you know, there's all kinds of drawings on it and paint. That's one of the areas that we've identified that we'd like to have cameras. I think the areas have been the bandstand, the pool area, the basketball court, and the playground. Those are the major areas where we see the most repetitive vandalism. We've had, park lights smashed. We actually went through a phase where somebody had a wrench, and you had to have a special wrench for the park benches, and they were literally going around and loosening the park benches, and they had the special hex wrench.
A lot of those benches are memorial benches dedicated to a family member, and they have significant sentimental value on top of the cost of replacing it.
And these are all things that we go into the park, like I said, in the morning, we take care of them, and, nobody may ever know besides us and the police that happened. Recently, the feces wiped all over the playground. We had to go in there and disinfect and power wash it. I mean, just crazy some of the things that happened there. So we kind of had it up to here, and that's why we brought it up again, that we'd like to have them installed. And
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions of either? Bruce or Jim?
Yes, I'd like to speak on this. The town has spent thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in that park through grants and through raising funds, the wine tasting and things we used to do on Friends of the Park and stuff, and selling the benches, as the deputy chief said, about people wanting to remember a family member. Waste to trash bans the same way. We have a duty, I think it's a historical park, we have a duty to protect it. We also have a duty to protect the citizens that are in it. Nothing worse than having a parent take one of their kids down the kids' playground, not realizing that something's broken, and it could be on Sunday morning, and the DPW isn't working Sunday morning, and they get on something and get hurt. We can't have that. And if we have cameras there and we see that, and you look at it and you may see it may be the same kids that may be doing it, thinking it's a big joke, but it really isn't a joke. And I mean, a lot of people think that, spending a certain amount of money on cameras, why do we have to do it? Patrol the park. Yeah, you're going to have a police officer 24 hours a day in the park? It's not going to happen. There's more important things, right? Also, we have other issues, within the park. People walk their dogs and they don't pick it up. One question, I think I sent you an email on that. Would it be valued if we had those stands with plastic dog bags on the out, not in the interior of the park, because that would just say to people, okay, you can walk your dog in the interior of the park, and if they don't pick it up, they don't pick it up. I mean, if it's on the outside where the sidewalks are, where I see most of the people walking their dogs, it may help if they forgot a bag. I know when I walk my son's dog, he always has plastic bags in a little pouch on the leash, right? But you have some people, I mean, do we really want people walking in the park and see somebody do something and not do anything about it and call the police and do things like that? I mean, they may feel that, one, it may not be their job, but two, they may be hesitant for fear that there'd be a backlash from that person seeing them do that. You know, not all citizens are trained police officers, right? So the cameras, I think, is an important thing we should have had done maybe 5-10 years ago. You know, just so that people understand that that's a public park, but respect it. And we have a lot of out-of-town people going to the park to play because they figure it's a safe area. We need to keep it that way. We had issues with needles in the park at one time. I don't hear so much of that anymore. I don't know if people are learning or we're just not recording it. You know, I don't know. But as far as people picking up trash and stuff like that, they need to respect the park. That's all I got. I'm off my soapbox.
Okay. Do you want to jump on a soapbox too?
I guess. So I the way Lincoln described this, it's a bit of a crime solving tool. So you'd hope that over time, obviously all of these incidents wouldn't go away, but you'd hope that over time people would learn there's cameras in the park and it would start to deter it. I think there are other ways that we can do that, and there might be a better use of, I mean, the estimate was about $50,000, developing other programs, or I don't know. I don't know that I've heard enough from this to justify the large upfront cost
I'd have to get a dollar amount
that would
associated.
inevitably have to go through town meeting approval, because we don't have $50,000 sitting around to purchase cameras. Along with that, it would need to be sold to the Capital Committee, the Finance Committee for recommendations to get to the floor. This has a long path to go, and if the DPW commissioners voted to support it, I would just recommend they get their ducks in a row and, I mean, really make the case for this, because if I'm not sold yet, it'll face some challenges along the way.
Okay, thank you, Justin. I don't see it just a DPW issue, though, problem, especially after listening to Joe. I think it's both a public safety and a public works issue. So I would hope that both the police department and in some cases the fire department, if we've had campfires, you know, set in the park. I think it's a town issue, not just a DPW issue. So I think I'm in favor of having the surveillance as you've described it, as something that it's not monitored. It's not monitored in real time, but it's something. It's a vehicle. It's there if we need it, and I think that would be a deterrent over time, and I think it's probably a valuable deterrent too. So I would hope then that the public safety, fire and police, and the DPW, if they could show support for this expenditure, it could get through those steps and hit town meeting in the springtime and maybe have a positive vote. But that would be my take on it. Lincoln, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's helpful to have that direction. It seems like, majority of the board here tonight would like that on the capital plan. And so with that in mind, that's helpful. And with that in mind, we'll get it on the capital plan. We can get it tentatively on a warrant for the spring town meeting. And then obviously town meeting can make a decision about it. There's obviously pros and cons to both of it, but it is clear that there's been an uptick in vandalism and activities going on there that we want to stop. We certainly searched around and had the conversation with our information technology director, Josh McNeil, to see, is there any other technology that can help deter this other than cameras? And there really isn't. Town meeting will decide, right? I think.
Okay, so we can put it on a path towards reaching town meeting.
Right. That's helpful.
Would the board like to make a motion to do so?
Oh, can we maybe motion to present this to the Capital Improvement Committee?
Yeah, so...
Because, Justin, you represent the board on the Capital Improvement Committee.
Yeah.
And you think it would be appropriate for us to motion to be on it, or should the DPW present it?
I think if we, Lincoln's working on drafting the capital plan that will get presented to the capital committee at some point this fall, or
right.
Yeah.
So if the board saw fit, you could certainly make a motion to proactively want to include it on the capital improvement plan.
I will make that motion that we proactively put the idea of cameras in the park to be presented to the capital plan that the Board of Selectmen would present to the Capital Committee.
With the support of Public Safety and Public Works.
I'll second that for the vote.
Is there any further discussion on it?
Just that, I obviously not going to stand in the way of this getting to town meeting and letting them have the final say, but still not sold 100%.
We heard what you said. We heard what you said.
Fair enough.
But we also know how you're going to vote.
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
So is it clear our direction then? Good.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
Town Administrator's Report, COVID-19 update.
Yes, thank you. So briefly on where we are at with our positivity rate and our positive cases and our vaccination rate. As the board knows from the great weekly updates from Chief Clancy, we had in the 2 weeks prior to this past Thursday, October 21st, the town of Whitman had 40 positive cases for a positivity rate of 3.11%. Similarly to in past weeks, every 2 weeks, it seems as though our fully vaccinated percentage of town residents who are eligible to be vaccinated bumps up about 1%. So we're now at 59%, whereas 2 weeks ago we were at 58%. So improvement, but not of a significant nature. As the board and the public probably saw in the news on Thursday, the booster shots were approved by the federal government for those in particular categories who have been fully vaccinated for at least 6 months. So as we've spoken about at past meetings, the town's COVID-19 clinical coordinator and the fire department and the health department have been working closely. I should also say the Housing Authority and the Council on Aging Director have been working closely to make sure that we have a plan in place when we knew this was coming, that boosters shots would be approved by the federal government. A large number of booster shots have been ordered for the town. We expect that they will get here hopefully no more than 2 weeks to a week to 2 weeks. Now that that's been approved by the federal government, we have in place a site at the Knights of Columbus, similarly to the past when the town fire department was doing initial shots at the Knights of Columbus. So we have a plan in place. We just need to wait for those booster shots to get here. And there is outreach going on with the Council on Aging and in particular the Housing Authority to make sure that those without access or easy access to the internet can get signed up when they're eligible to get a shot. And similarly, we'll have a system online so that other folks who are eligible for a shot can sign up to do so. And just, I think that's a common question and regarding the mixing and matching of different types of vaccines, if Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. And in consultation with Chief Clancy, we're taking a wait-and-see approach on that right now to see, how many booster shots we get, and whether or not we want to just give boosters to folks who had initially gotten Moderna, since we know we're going to be getting Moderna boosters. But that plan is in place as soon as we get the shots that we've ordered. The other thing I wanted to touch on is that, if the board recalls, the Board of Health in its past few meetings have taken some votes on recommendations to the Board of Selectmen in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. This morning, the Board of Health had a meeting which I attended. The board did decide to rescind its previous recommendation on having capacity limits in meeting rooms in this meeting room and the basement meeting room. It did make the decision to rescind that. It did separately make a recommendation this morning to have a vaccine mandate for all new employees, so not existing employees, but newly hired employees for the town of Whitman, to be required to be fully vaccinated or have signed under the pains and penalties of perjury a religious objection to that, or a doctor's note certifying that it's not medically appropriate for them to be vaccinated. So I wanted to report on that recommendation from the Board of Health. And obviously that's, it's up to the Board of Selectmen what you'd like to do with that recommendation.
Any discussion or questions?
Yes, I have one question. When, Bobby, the chief can answer it. When we get our booster, do we bring the original card that we received when we got our 2 shots, and they'll just add the date of the booster? Okay. So I mean, people would have to know that, so if they didn't misplace their card or wherever it is,
The other aspect of that.
Yeah.
The other aspect of that is a lot of people, we found, that have laminated their cards.
Yeah.
So we will be redoing cards so that people can show that they've had their 3rd shot and, in our case, the booster. So it's appropriately documented. We have access to that through the LIS.
Yeah, it's online, yeah.
Lincoln, was there any rationale for restricting the vaccination mandate for new employees rather than all employees?
I think the thinking, that was a 2-to-1 vote. So there is a member who had made a motion to have a full vaccine mandate with those religious and medical exemptions, and that failed on a 2-to-1 vote. So it was 2 votes in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention. So that member clearly is in favor of a full vaccine mandate for all employees with the religious and medical exemptions. I think the primary reasoning that I heard for not having a full mandate was civil liberties issue of it being a personal choice about whether or not to be vaccinated, and while the board,
As opposed to being concerned about public health?
yes, I think, I'm not sure that the 2 members.
Civil liberties up and public health down. Is that basically the?
I'd want the 2 members who voted for it to answer that balancing question, but the thing that was voiced proactively as to why they did not want a full vaccination mandate was the civil liberties argument.
Okay, thank you.
I know that I was hoping we'd get some guidance out of OSHA on what was going to happen with private employers with over 100 employees before this issue came up before the board. But since the Board of Health raised it, maybe it's worth revisiting when we have a full board in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, I think. So we'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting. Financial policy.
If I could just briefly, since the chief is here, just mention, certainly we know the storm is coming, and there's certainly quite a bit of storm preparation going on, so I'll just mention that the Emergency Operations Center is on standby to deal with this. We do know that we're expecting possible winds of 75 miles per hour, so that's certainly serious and may very well result in power outages and whatnot. But certainly, he and I and Chief Hamlin and the DPW folks are in close contact to make sure that we're up and running as soon as possible, especially if we do have impacts from flooding or from downed power lines and whatnot. So I just want to mention that since the chief is here. Regarding the financial policy, so Sean Kane, who's here tonight, resident Sean Kane, had brought up that he'd like to possibly see some additions of some financial policies for the town. I think that's certainly appreciated by me, that there are certainly a couple things. We do have several financial policies that deal with several matters. In my opinion, they are generally very good policies. I know it was something on my mind, and I appreciated him bringing it up, to come up with some revisions to those, in particular to the disposition of surplus property. That's a finance policy that could use a little tweak, I think. And then also we do have the one recommendation from our auditor is in concert with the Government Accounting Standards Board's new guidelines for the town to have a federal awards and procurement policy. So that's certainly another financial policy that I think it would be wise for the town to adopt as we're thinking about financial policies. The current financial policies that we have are a cash receipt and petty cash handling policy, a fund balance policy, an investment policy statement for investment funds, and as I mentioned, the disposition of surplus property policy. What Mr. Kane had been talking about was the possibility of also having some policies primarily dealing with the appropriate level of debt for the town and what an acceptable level of debt in the in the policy view of the town is. For context, we are pretty much, we do not have, the town of Whitman do not have a lot of debt in comparison with our like peers of similar wealth, similar equalized valuation, similar population. So, it's, many towns do not have a specific policy regarding how much debt is acceptable, but it's certainly something that Mr. Kane might want to address if there's in particular something that he'd like to see.
Resident Kane?
Resident Kane.
Resident Kane.
Resident Kane.
I like Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane? Sure, Citizen Kane.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a great conversation. I think why this is important now was a number of reasons, but mainly, generally speaking, financial policy helps guide your spending and borrowing practices. So for like bond ratings and stuff like that, it sets limits and it allows the public to know that you're making decisions that are going to keep the financial well-being of the town in line with these limits. So there's a transparency piece that I think is really helpful. Specifically to the debt, I think that's relevant now because there are a couple of big projects on the horizon. The way it often plays out with, whether it's on social media or just when you're talking to people about, potentially new DPW building in the middle school, immediately people get concerned, like borrowing more money, another debt exclusion, that kind of thing. And I don't think people have a good frame of reference as to, well, how much debt do we have, like currently on the books, and when is it coming off the books, and are we in good shape or are we not in great shape? And I think having a debt policy specifically gives us a pretty good gauge so that when it's framed, because as Lincoln said, if we were to frame the DPW right now, I think it would be appropriate to say say, well, if you look at the debt policy, or a policy that's in line with, say, best practices, you would see that we have very little debt. And this is actually a very good time to borrow. And a healthy amount of borrowing is really appropriate for a town of our size, so it would give the transparency to the town about the appropriate level of debt, and it would help frame, some of the difficult decisions that we have to make over the next couple of years. Because I'm worried without the financial policy, we can't do that. Not it's a free-for-all, but it makes it more difficult to make some of those arguments. And then just lastly, having financial policy, or the right financial policy in place, allows us to make a better financial forecast. If we have that and we mix it with the revenue projections, then we can realistically say, listen, over the next couple of years, this is what we can realistically predict. So that when we're having discussions with the schools or different financial partners, we can say, these are our revenue projections, and these are the limits that we're going to stay within for our spending and borrowing practices. Therefore, we can have confidence about making this financial forecast. And I think that will really help with a lot of the negotiation piece that often happens with some of those financial partners, the school in particular. That makes sense.
Thank you, Sean.
No, I was just going to say, so if the board did want to, in a policy direction, did want to have, for example, a recommended debt level policy, the effect of that would effectively be to raise our acceptable level of debt. Our level of debt is so low right now as compared with similar communities that effectively if we as a town and you folks as the policymakers wanted a policy that laid out an acceptable level of debt, presumably somewhere around in the average of like communities, then effectively what that would mean is that we would be saying that it's fine to have a relatively significantly more debt than we do now, since it's so low now. So just to sort of be clear about if we had such a policy, what its effect would be. Obviously, we have several large projects that presumably we as a town will be pursuing over the next few years: a DPW building, a middle school. Obviously, the sewer force main was already accepted. So presuming that some form of those projects will be approved by the town in the coming years, our debt will necessarily be higher, quite a bit higher than it is now. Having a policy would help dictate how high do we as a town want that to go. So just to sort of put a little more color on it.
Yes.
So I have a question. I'm hoping that either Carl or Dan can remember this. Back in 2018, I was a FinCom representative on the budget working group run by Scott Lambiase. I think Brian was the other appointed board member on that working group, and we did draft some financial policies.
That's right.
Yeah, Sean, did you see those? Or those?
Number, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I'm trying to search 2018 emails over here, but I did find that the recommendation out of that board was, or that working group was, that excluded debt service costs should be less than 12% of tax levy at all times, and general fund debt service. So debt within the general fund shall remain between 1 and 2.5% of general fund operating revenues. So we do have, I don't know if the board adopted those policies. I know that the working group kicked them, I think voted them out of there back to the board.
Right, I don't recall.
I don't think they were ever formally adopted.
Okay.
From what I can tell, no, I do not believe they were.
Okay.
And the basis for those percentages, you must have done some study.
We'd done some work, I think largely pulled from what Scott was working on in Duxbury at the time.
Okay.
But that might be a place to start. I just forwarded this to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good reference.
Yeah.
Good reference. Yeah, and the what you're saying makes total sense. We have to be careful and clear that the levels that we recommend have some data behind them.
Right.
Survey of like towns.
Yeah, we are certainly low, and if we compare ourselves in terms of household wealth, in terms of population, of like communities, we have a low debt burden. And just
That case needs to be clear then.
Right.
It needs to be made clearly.
Right.
And one way to make it clear is to perhaps review what that former committee did and see if there needs to be any adjustments in its conclusions.
just as far as one guidepost that we are nowhere near, I'm not sure. I think there's maybe one or two municipalities that may be anywhere near, but just so the board knows sort of the bumpers, as it were, in bowling, the one part of Proposition 2.5, the state law that a lot of folks don't know about, is that debt may not be more than 5% of your total equalized valuation. That is to say, the total assessed value of residential personal property and industrial commercial property in town. We're nowhere near that. I don't believe anyone's really coming up against that. But just so you know sort of what is in state law as far as what's allowable. Not necessarily what's desirable, but what's allowable.
If I can, Kyle. In your comments of what we're looking at, remember we also voted, we pay 1/8 of South Shore Votex. Was that 16 million or something like that?
Yeah.
Going over repairing some repairs to the school. What we've done in the past, in all the years that I was on the finance committee, is when we were looking at particular projects, and the projects at the time was to redo the town hall as far as the inner doors and some of the offices and then the roof and stuff like that, was we would look at what we have out there as far as borrowing is concerned and when they were going to be paid off. And so when one bond was paid off, we borrowed a new bond, and that's why we've kept the town pretty stable. And it's worked in the past. If we come up with a number that the town can afford or a percentage that the town can afford, doesn't mean we have to meet it every year. It means we can meet it if we needed it. Doesn't mean that you're going to go out, because we have items capital items that are on a yearly basis for vehicles, whether it's for the DPW, the fire department, or the police department. We have them every year, and those are costly items, especially DPW trucks. And I know in the past we have had to postpone buying trucks, and we're using 1999 trucks at the DPW because we didn't want to overspend, because we're still paying off the brand new high school and things like that. So having that ceiling of what the town can afford to borrow without going crazy on an override or something like that is, we need to be careful, because we have yearly items that need to be, and we should estimate what those are on a regular basis. It might be $300,000, $400,000, maybe $500,000 a year in equipment on a yearly basis for three main departments. It's probably more than that, much more than that, right? Especially a fire truck. And I know we put money away for a new fire truck or an ambulance on a regular basis from the ambulance account. We kind of take a little of that, even though that's back into the general fund now. Don't we have a small amount? But we don't have that in the police department. What fines you produce goes straight into the bottom line. So we have the policy. We know how much we can afford on a yearly basis. Doesn't mean we have to spend it on a yearly basis, because we have regular items that on a regular basis.
Well, I think even, if I may, some of the recommendations from the Madden report, the 5% number that's kicked around with the schools, or even some of the capital expenses that you're referencing now, and the recommendations he made, I think implementing that right into the policy, formal policy that you adopt, if you're comfortable with the levels. I mean, the policy that you adopt, I think, would just give more transparency about the limits that you're comfortable with, so that we can then make better financial decisions, or not better, more transparent financial decisions. So I don't see how that can hurt, taking recommendations from a consultant that you're comfortable with and moving it into policy, because it just shores up all that stuff, and I think it'll make things more proactive instead of reactive. But.
So Lincoln, given this discussion, might we be expecting some policy recommendations over the next short period of time?
Yes. Yep.
Anything else?
Just thank you, Sean. I think we've, over the last couple of months, been learning we need to start writing some of these things down.
Yes, write it down.
Yep.
That's a George Strait song, I think. Write it down.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Whitman Middle School project.
Yes, so the search for an owner's project manager is moving ahead, pretty full steam. So last Thursday, Selectmen Lamatina and I and the rest of the middle school building committee spent about 5 hours interviewing candidates to be the owner's project manager for the middle school for the design and feasibility stage, just for the design and feasibility stage. The preferred candidate for that, which is a company named Colliers, was identified. It was actually earlier today that a subcommittee of myself and the school's business manager, John Stanbrook, and our building commissioner, Bob Curran, met with Colliers in an attempt to hammer out an agreement on price. I tentatively think we're there. I'm not really prepared to share those details because we obviously want to get that in place and get it approved by the school building committee itself. But I tentatively think we are moving along there. Their expectation, Collier's expectation, if in fact they are the chosen owner's project manager, is that the design and feasibility stage would last approximately 22 months. So that is their expectation. And then when the middle school building committee chooses and signs a tentative agreement with the identified owner's project manager, that would then go to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for their approval, which we're now on track, provided everything goes well, to occur in early December. So that's where we're at with the project. It's moving along, but one step at a time.
Any questions?
Yeah, are we looking at a new building or having it redone?
So that's exactly what the owner's project manager, their primary job at this stage is to help us identify whether it's, as you say, entirely new building or a renovation and addition.
A sewer force main project.
Yes, so as the board recalls, this was approved for funding and for some borrowing at the June town meeting. There's been several months of work on making sure that we have clear title to the entire easements. That was a pretty large project on the part of town council, but they did a great job in getting there. Now the invitation for bids, or it's actually a request for proposals, has gone out and is out there on the street now with in seeking proposals, and the bid deadline is November 12th. So those bids will then be opened after that, and we'll be looking towards hopefully getting construction going early next year, probably spring, but obviously dependent on weather and coming to an agreement with whomever the winning bidder is. So that is coming along.
And lastly,
strategic planning. So as the board knows, there were 24 of us, including several members of the board, on full 6 hours on Saturday, with chairs of several boards, committees, commissions, several department heads, and several Whitman members of the school committee, to look at strategic planning. In the morning, the group collectively came up with a draft mission statement, vision, and values. That draft for the town, I should say. That draft mission statement would be to provide responsible, sustainable services by fostering strong community relationships for our citizens, future citizens, and visitors. the vision statement, the draft vision statement would be a welcoming, collaborative community that values its history to ensure a successful future. And the draft value statement would be sustainable, supportive, respectful, and participatory government. Then in the afternoon, the group looked at particular initiatives in 5 key areas as to what we'd be looking at as a town collectively over the next 5 years. Those key 5 areas were finance, public facilities and infrastructure, economic development, citizen services, and schools. So that was the work of this past Saturday. Now the steps in the strategic planning process will be, we have been discussing having a department head meeting to talk specifically about the implementation of the initiatives identified in those 5 areas. We had some specificity on some of the areas and maybe not quite as specific on some other areas of the 5 initiative areas. But certainly moving towards the strategic planning outcome is probably having that department head meeting, discussing those initiatives, and then working towards our consultant and Donna coming up with a draft strategic plan itself. Obviously happy to discuss further. I think it would be, whether it's tonight or at a near future meeting, I think it would be great to have the board take a vote on the mission statement, vision statement, and values. I think that's a really great, important step in the town for any organization to have a mission statement, especially. So I think that would be great to have a vote at some point from the board endorsing those or endorsing them with modifications, obviously. So yeah, and obviously happy to take any further questions about where we are with the process and further discussion.
Yeah, I think it might make sense to have them in writing for the next meeting, and we could put them up for a board vote anyway, as a result of the meeting that we had on October 23rd. Did I get the impression that Ann was going to look at them too and see if they needed any tweaking themselves?
Yeah, I think so. This is sort of precisely the language, and she sent it over today. So
it's been
I think
through her filter.
I was comparing as he went. It was different, slightly grammatically.
different?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Some
Well, why don't we
grammatical improvements, actually.
Why don't we put them on paper, and so they'll be on the agenda the next time, and we can look at it then.
Great. There's one other thing I just mentioned. It's sort of a side thing, but I think since we're talking about sort of the larger picture things and strategic planning, I believe that this would be something, if it was to change, the town meeting would need to change. But I'll just mention it, which is our motto. Our town motto is formerly South Abington. It's not a big deal, but I think we could probably have some improvement on that. So since we're discussing these large issues, I just mentioned it.
Well, Lincoln mentioned this to me last week, and my suggestion was currently Whitman.
Currently Whitman.
But anyway, yeah, we could be looking at that too. What?
Cookie Town?
Cookie Town. Yeah, Chippy Town. No, Cookie Town. Okay. Okay, I think that exhausts the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion?
Second.
No discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We can start our meetings at 6.